I never thought that I would ever be commuting. But the funniest thing, before I got married, I lived with a family. And one night we said, let's go down and see grandmother, myself and my girlfriend. She was a bit of a fortune teller. One of the things she told me was, the sea is going to have great influence in your life. And I said, "Way girl, I can't stand the water. Still don't know how to swim." How right she was. Well, I was very new to the boat then, very new to commuting. I started my commuting career, as we say, in 1980 when I moved to Bell Island. I came over here in the summer and we were starting to build our house. And I thought, this is not bad. This is absolutely going to be great because I love the boat and I met a lot of people that I would never have met traveling the boat. But I didn't take into account the northeast winds rolling down that bay later on that winter. Oh yeah, I can remember a lot of bad storm days and ice, but I very rarely ever miss work. Because I traveled so much internationally then for the government, I would often have an apartment in the wintertime or stay with somebody rather than come home. If I heard the day before that there was a storm coming tomorrow, wind, I would stay over. If there was ice in the bay, I never came home. You didn't take a chance on that, but in those days we just had to depend on the forecast. That was your Bible of weather. Really, when I started commuting, I was on the John Guy. Now, the John Guy was an open boat, and you went downstairs. There was a female part section and a door for the male section. Never the twain shall meet, as we say. Then when we came to the Catherine, which was a grand old boat, but very top heavy, so she was very bad in wind. The Catherine had a piece in the center, so this part would be more narrow. That part was the wider part out here. And this long, narrow hallway. And we named it Chicken Coop. Probably I named it Chicken Coop, because I was up, whatever bad was on the go, I was in there. And we'd stand in there, and we'd put our leg up on the wall and sit there puffing on a cigarette. Some people would be, and telling old stories, and we holding ourselves up. We didn't even notice sometimes the weather was so bad. We got to the point where storms were just another day. We learned quickly storytelling. What else would you do in 20 minutes? In a storm, probably. We talk about our families, and we talk about our children, and what was happening on the island now, and whatever was troubling somebody. Some days there were deaths, and other days there were births, but we went through it all together. When I started commuting first, I got chatting to people about women's groups on Bell Island. Were there any women's groups? No. No groups on Bell Island. Well, there were the fraternal Knights of Columbus and Kiwanis and Shrine and that kind of stuff. But there were no such thing as a women's group. So I said, well, I'm thinking about starting one. And they said, what are you going to do, play cards? And I said, tell you what now, if I start one, you watch me and see how many cards are going to get played. There was a little store on the corner here, and I went over there and I grabbed myself an exercise book and a pencil, a pen, and I said to the owner, Minnie, tell me some good women up here, I'm going to start a group. And I ended up with 20 or 30 women. I had met a couple of them in my commuting, and I said, I'm going to start the group, and I'm going to build a community center. We're going to do programs. We're going to raise money for things on Bell Island. And I had a little company at the time called Lance Enterprise, and I gave them $15 to start off our bank account. $15. And I said, if we ever get below $15, we're going to close up. We never got below $15. One night at a meeting, I said, what do you think about starting a community centre? Well, again, they looked at me with their, if you think we can do it, we can do it attitude. And the only place up here was the old Anglican school, which was owned by the Anglican church. So I went over one day after services. They invited me up on the altar to speak to the congregation. So I explained why we wanted, who we were, what our aims were, what we were trying to do in Bell, and I asked if we could possibly have school. And we would get the funds to renovate the school. And so on, so on, so on. And we walked out of there with the school. And within a year we had a community centre up and running. We ran summer programs for the kids. We had evening programs. They did homework in there. We had exercise programs for the adults. We had all kinds of concerts and weddings galore down there. So it was a wonderful time, and a lot of that came about because on the boat we would talk about this and people would give me ideas. You know, the ideas of your buddies are great ideas because they know the island. Back in the early 80s, the Boys and Girls Club was in financial difficulty, as they always are, because they're that kind of an organization. So they called a meeting and I said, well, why don't we ask every group on Bell Island to do a project? Every one of them should be able to raise $1,000. So I chaired the meeting that night, if I remember correctly, and I was quite pleased with myself and all of us. We were going to do these great projects until somebody said, hey, Madam Chairperson, what are you going to do? And here I was stuck, because I had a women's group called the Lancers at the time. And I said, oh, don't worry about it. I'm going to write you a book. Oh yeah. So I came to the next morning, remembered I promised to write a book. And I didn't have a lot of time to do it. So I started interviewing people on the boat saying, I got to write this book, you know I have. So give me your story. And I would sit with them and get their story. I had a little book with me or on the back of an envelope or whatever, piece of paper, light bill, didn't matter, I wrote on the back of it. And that's how I wrote that first book. Well, I bought a box of them on the boat the first day they were printed, and the box was gone. I had to bring the second box next day. And everybody was happy with it, and it was history now. So they had something that said, this is the history of the Boys and Girls Club, and these are the people on Bell Island. And so then the second one came around when I was president of the Legion, and I said to, again, financial difficulties, Legion's always in trouble. Not to worry, got the experience, now I'll write you a book. And we sold it through the Legion, did quite well on it. Sold it for a little bit more than the first one, sold more copies. And then this one, I wrote after we decided to hold a centennial celebration, a full year centennial. I wanted to capture the history. It was 100 years since mining began on Bell Island, on the surface. The underground mining didn't start till much later. So what I did, we had our reunion in 1995, so the first 45 pages of this are all history. And they still look at this and they say, now what's happened this year we can hang our head on. In the first two books, I was traveling when I wrote them. And I just collected all the scraps of paper in a bag in my purse. And I'd come home and straighten them out, and then I'd have to enhance on the story, you know. But it was a great time. I enjoyed doing it. I met so many people. I hired this young man, and he went around on a bicycle and sketched. So everything is on here that's sketched. For instance, this is his sketch. And all the pictures in here are his, by Jimmy Curnew. So that's the story of the 3 books, written on the back of envelopes. Great memories. It's a great way to get to know Bell Island, I'll tell you. If you're reading these books, you're reading a history of the mining. Most of the people that would travel the boats would have had a background as miners' children or as neighbors of miners or whatever. Now, when the commuting for work started was mainly after the mines closed. Because when the mine was open, I think there was 100% employment here. And now I was hearing those stories, which I never knew about because I lived in St. John's. And there was one lady told me the story of her father coming through the trees on the miners' trail, and how they would, a big family, and in the evening they would get ready, Daddy was coming home, and they'd go outside the door and they'd watch for his miner's light. And he'd always have his light on because they had to come from right down the other end of the island up to just down the road, through the woods. So they had the lights on and they'd see the light coming and they knew Daddy was home. But every story in these books has a memory because of the people that told me their stories. And that's how I did it. Here's a little story. I wrote this for an event that we had, a Christmas party for commuters. Just a bit of fun. Ode to Bell Island commuters. When Joey closed down Dasco Mines, we moved to the Labrador. We moved to Galt and Edmonton, where we'd never been before. We toiled by day, no one could say the Newfie boys were slack, but how we yearned for the dear old rock, so we packed up and came back. Now the Tickle is our highway, and the old beach hill our byway. Storms won't keep us from workday, we're commuters with the NTC. No traffic jams at 5 a.m., the stars are still in view. As we line up to board the boat, we're directed by the crew. The whistle blows, and off she goes, as all head down below. Now hang on, boys, it's no surprise we're in for quite a blow. We must take jobs across the bay or join the welfare line. We'd rather live here on the rock, for cities we don't pine. We sail away at the break of day, we're all headed for the shore. Through the waves we go, though it's 10 below, soon we'll be home again once more. The Friday lineups in the Cove, they make her load and go. We'll stay on till our turn comes up through rain or sleet or snow. The weekends here pass round the cheer while we watch her ride the waves. There's an undertow, but the boat will go, or she'll rock, but we'll be brave. We're a damn fine crew, good buddies too, as we sail the waves each day, with our lunch pails packed and our decks all stacked as we head across the bay. But take heart, my son, 'cause our day will come when we'll strike oil on the bell. Then we'll all be rich, no more boats to catch, and no more we'll ride the swells. Now the Tickle is our highway, and the old beach hill our byway. Storms won't keep us from work day. We're commuters with the NTC. And we all learned that, and we all sang it that night. Every one of us. I'll tell you something, I really learned, because I was an immigrant to Bell Island. But all of this came about because I had to commute to go to work. It was a good way to learn about Bell Island. It was a good way to get to meet people. Like my group, the Lancers, we had dances all the time, and that would always be published on the boat. And we'd have parties and birthday parties and everything else up there. You know, we were the social media at the time, before social media, because that's where we got all our news. We'd go on the boat in the morning and they'd say, oh, did you hear Mrs. So-and-so passed away last night, or Mr. So-and-so, or so-and-so had a baby, or so-and-so just sold her house, and everything that went on Bell Island. We knew about it from our association with the other commuters. I started in 1980 and I ended in 2009. So these were the years that I commuted. But it was a different time, it was a good time, and I enjoyed it. I loved commuting, except for the real bad days. I can remember being out there in swells. You never thought the boat would ever make it. But because we were all together and because we were, you know, just telling old stories and tell us something, Kay, or tell us something, Joan, make us feel better here. We're perishing with fright. We never thought we'd see the other side. And that's the reason that I wrote the funny one in the back of this one. It's called The Day Before Christmas on the Guy. I still post this at Christmas time. And people have written me and said, my God, I don't remember that happening. How did you manage to get out of that? And it's just a joke. A Christmas fantasy. A Bell Island version. 'Twas the day before Christmas, and down on the guy the tickle was storming, the ramp rising high, while up at the wheelhouse just searching to see our Walt blows a whistle and sips on his tea. Now this is a story of a joke. It's just passing time. We got stuck on Kelly's Isle Reef. No such thing, but we got stuck there. And how they had to get us off there. The Coast Guard's en route, but no chopper in sight. Poor Walt is half blind, peering into the night. That's our captain. He got a great kick at this. Then lo and behold, there appeared round the cape from out of the darkness. Wait, I know that shape. It's the Catherine, me hearties. The Coast Guard was called, but how did she know? The old Catherine's watchman heard Walt's SOS. She's in for repairs, but they wouldn't miss this. So, you know, it goes on. So thanks to the Coast Guard, all hands plus the crew of our trusty old Catherine, who rescued us too. Merry Christmas to you and the boys on the guy. Still beached on the reef, oh they're high but not dry. So off to the rock heads the Catherine full steam. Commuters all singing, 'tis now but a dream. So long we recall when the seas were so high on the day before Christmas when we sailed on the guy. You know, things would happen on the boat. Stories would be told. And I'd sit there, probably adding a little bit to it. They'd say, watch out, there's something coming. Her mind is clicking over. You know you're going to be in the book. So, it was nice. Yeah. I don't know if they have anything like us today. So, in 1979, I moved over here, and I'm still here. How right she was. The sea is going to have a great influence on your life. In my book, I said that most of these stories were written on the ferry, and they were. They really were. Everybody can tell you that.